faking it till you make it stop being a fake. Just say, I just don't know yet. I call it the be dumb quick movement. If you don't know what it is, just raise your hand and say, I don't understand. If you're in the right room, they'll teach you and they'll help you and they'll bring you along. And trust me, I've been kicked out of places who look down at people who don't know everything, and I'm glad I'm not there anymore.
You're listening to the Genius Scouts podcast with Justin Oberman and Aaron Zakowski. Join us each week as we bring you exclusive conversations with the business leaders and innovators you need to know about, sharing the secrets that fuel their success and power their personal brands. Let's dive in.
Aaron, today we have a guest whose journey is nothing short of extraordinary, someone who proves that success isn't about following the traditional path, but about carving your own. And I truly mean this. It's not like hyperbole. Julian Scadden is the president and CEO of Nextar Network, a nationwide organization dedicated to empowering professionals in the home service industry. But his story isn't your typical corporate ladder climb. It's one of resilience, reinvention, and relentless drive. Julian dropped out of high school, faced homelessness, and started digging sewer line ditches. But he learned the trade, became a coach, and ultimately rose to lead one of the most respected trade organizations in the industry. What I find interesting here is that in a time when artificial intelligence is rewriting the rules of business, there's one thing it can't replicate: the people who build, fix, and keep the world running. Julian is one of those people. He isn't just a leader in the trades. He's proof that in the age of automation, mastering a skilled trade isn't just a job, it's a power move. Julian, welcome to Genius Scouts.
Thank you so much. That was awesome.
So Julian, normally in the intro that we have is a lot longer, where we actually just tell your story because we want to get the story over with, because the stories are important. They're great. And we tell the story as best we can, but then we like to get into like the meatier stuff, like what are you working on now? Why people should be paying attention to you. But I think that your story is actually part of that, more so than usual. So we're going to do a rare thing here and give you the opportunity to tell your story.
Well, thank you for that. I'll need a little bit lead and guide, but I promise for those of you that are choosing to join in, we'll tie it back to business. We're going to talk about the past, but let's talk about how it's formed the decisions that we can make today, the influences that it has on me today, and how it can move your business or maybe even your own personal discernment going forward. And I always learn from these things too, so I really appreciate you all sharing this platform with me. Where do you want to begin?
I would say let's start from the beginning. I mean, I've learned part of your story from your LinkedIn posts, and in the early days, you speak about not finishing high school, starting off working in the trades, plumbing technician, not succeeding, and then you've risen to the top over here. Would love to just hear more about how that's happened.
Yeah, well, I'll give you a really quick version of that, but I do want to actually impress a few other things as, folks can find themselves anywhere along the journey here. But let's go back in time a little bit. So let's set the stage. Born in the mid 70s, went through the 80s. So there was this thing that, there was this hyper influence of the economy growing in the 80s. And I had parents that wanted to provide for us, and they wanted to, create a new life for us. And they went out into the workforce, and they were working very hard. And through, economic turmoils and concerns, my parents separated. And the reason I share that is because my life has been a series of events that help me look at the world differently. So before we even get to work, let's talk about the things that form ourselves. And hopefully through this, some of you can find some areas where you can either find freedom, validation, confirmation, inspiration, and some of the things I'll say. So it happens to a lot of folks. Parents separate at a formative age. I was a young man. My father, the man that was the strongest man in the world and probably had the fastest vehicle on the road as far as I thought, he was just gone. He was gone. And my parents were going through that, and he was going through what he went through to, figure these things out. So as a result, I find myself in this single parent home, and I have an older sister, but my mom now, she's working 2 jobs to provide for us. And again, nobody's at fault. These are just the things that happened as I recall them. And she was amazing, took great care of us. She was, one of the first people in her family to put herself through college. So one of the things that happened with mom is she did something that annoyed me as a child, but I'm grateful for today: articulation, pronunciation, and that there's a name and a title for everything. I couldn't say, what's that? that describe it, or what's its name, or what's its purpose. And it drove me crazy, right? So it made me nuts. And we lived in these, not the best neighborhoods. We were just, I'd say the sidewalk across from the worst neighborhood. So we always had it good in my eyes. We didn't have it as bad as other people I observed. So I always had this bent. And I think there's a little bit of this that is internally a gift that I can't take credit for, that I just had a little bit of this optimism in me through it all. I just always could see how good we had it, no matter how bad we had it, no matter how hard things got. I got a little bit better than them. And, at least I have this or that. So life goes on. I choose to be a knucklehead kid and hang out with my cousins and friends, and ultimately choose to drop out of school. And around the same time, mom is going through what she needs to go through and needs to move back in with her mother. And it was a turning point where I needed to become a man, and I wanted to figure it out on my own. So I've always been employed, even if it was cash under the table for delivering pizza flyers or cleaning out bars. I always looked at what's the work that people like adults don't want to do. And if I go in with that teenage energy and I do it, and I can get cash and, cash under the table, I don't have to pay taxes. So I just had this mentality of getting out there and figuring it out. Well, there was this guy, lived at the end of our block, had a business, and I knew I wanted a real job. I wanted a real job, but I didn't even know what he did. I said, I think it's some kind of plumbing company. So I asked him if I could have a job, and I went to his business, and he did what many of us who are in the trades, what happened to me, happened to many of us. I walked in and he said, here you go. And for those of you that are just listening, you can't see what I'm gesturing is I was handed a shovel. Well, I didn't know what that meant. We're plumbers. Why do I have a shovel? Well, it's time to go dig ditches for those sewer repairs. And you all know what is encompassed in a sewer. So it's not a pleasant job. It's not a fun job, whether it's cold or hot. And there's going to be sewage everywhere, but this is how I got started. Ultimately leaned that into becoming a technician, which I was not good at, which I've talked about on LinkedIn. And then I love and I appreciate what you said, Justin, about, being resilient and all those beautiful words you said about me. But there's one thing I want to add on to my story. A lot of mentors, a lot of angels, a lot of people that believed in me and gave me a chance.
Mm-hmm.
So, I'll pause there, but I wanted to at least get you up to speed to the point where I felt like we were kind of talking about. Tell me what I've left out or where you want to pick up.
You know what? I think you've left that a lot, but I think that what we can actually do is shape this podcast around your story so that by the end of it, we get to the end. Because I think that there's a lot of important lessons at each stage, particularly the one that you just said about the mentors. A lot of people that helped you along the way, because, it's true. A lot of people say that there is no such thing as the lone genius, right? Everybody's had help at some point along the way, even if it's just inspiration, even if it's just brainstorming, even if it's just that. And you talk about this one man, I forget, you said his name in a post once. I think it was today, actually, that you mentioned his name, and really gave you a chance, even when you weren't good at one thing where most people would kind of like kick you out. He didn't, right?
So we're in this organization, and the gentleman's name is Ed Coleman. I presume that's who it's going to be. I talk about him a lot. I exalt him a lot because, number one, got on my nerves for a long time. I didn't enjoy it. Ed was not my favorite guy for a long time. So I got to rib a little. I will tell you that Ed has passed on. Rest his soul. I love him. May he rest in peace. He was, and I'm sure he had just as many people who have not so pleasing stories. He was gregarious. He's this big 6'6" blonde man, hunting, fishing, just a loud guy, just a big, gregarious, outgoing, outspoken, loud guy. So I'm working at this plumbing company, and the plumbing company that I was working at had actually been acquired by a corporation, and they merged 5 companies together. I didn't know that at the time when I was out in the field. So as Justin being more aware of some of the specifics of my story, I'm going to be a technician and I'm going to be a plumber. And back then I didn't even know the great money they made. I just wanted to do something that I found this pride in working with my hands and coming home dirty that I thought was like respectable. I thought people that look like I look today in their tie and their shirts, like, you're getting rich off the sweat off of other people, and that's the neighborhood I grew up in. That's what we believed. And so this company was acquired, and as I remember, Ed calls me into the office one day, and he was always direct. That's one thing you could count on, whether he had the communication skills or the professionalism in his communication that could survive today. I don't know, but he was always direct. Julian, you're too slow, man. You're going to come here and join me in the office. I said, what do you mean? He said, look, technicians love training you because you keep the back of their truck hyper clean. You keep the front of their truck hyper clean. You keep the outside of their truck hyper clean. You know which tool to grab when they need, but you're slow. you're slow, kid. You're like just literally, not mentally, just literally, you're slow in performing the tasks." And he said, "Well, Julian, we appreciate that. You know, we're being reviewed right now by this corporation that just purchased us. And if you're not generating revenue, you're going to get fired." And he said, "Julian, if you stay where you're at, you're going to get fired. So I'm going to bring you to the office. I want you to answer some phones. I'm going to have you organizing invoices. Just a lot of administrative busy work." And I said, "Okay, I wanted a job. I didn't have anywhere else to go, and it just made sense to me. Okay, this is a new opportunity is how I looked at it. But here's the other thing: as much as I talked about people in shirts and ties and making money off the sweat of other people, I'll tell you the very first thing I did, I ran out, and gosh, I can't even remember because I went out and bought three white dress shirts, and
Mhm.
wherever I went, they were so cheap they were basically see through. I remember I learned that real quick. I had to have an undershirt on under it, and then I went to my best friend growing up. His younger brother worked at this store called Banana Republic, I think, but he was the only guy I knew with ties. So I go to him, I go, "Oh my gosh, I'm going to be working in the office next week. I need some ties." So he loaned me three ties, and I used to loosen them just enough where I could put them over my head and take them off because I didn't know how to tie them. And I wore a tie and the khakis and the same three shirts every day. But Ed took that chance on me to just learn a new skill set. He thought he saw something in me, and ultimately it really began to pay off. So I'll go ahead and I'll pause there. But that was kind of the transition, the segue out of the field into the office, just because I wasn't real skilled with my hands. I wasn't real good with the craft. I was interested, but I wasn't making money. So again, beyond resilience or any of those other factors, insights and all this, guess what? God had a plan, stepped in, and just, if you listen and follow the signs. And for those of you who have your own beliefs, I'll use a word that you may choose to or not when I say God, but I'm going to tell you something divine. If I don't acknowledge that, or we could just call it luck if you want, but there's no way I should be in front of you today. There were a lot of other factors outside of my own hard work.
I'll tell you one of the things that really resonates. I mean, obviously your story is incredible, and the hard work and resilience that you put in. But the pedestal, I guess, you put the trades and we would call blue collar professions on it, I think is refreshing. I grew up in a world where my parents were both college educated white collar workers. I was taught a path growing up. It's university, it's college, it's white collar. That's the only option. My kids, I've got high school kids and such who are thinking about their next paths in life and where they're going to go professionally. And I've come to recognize that, even though many people in circles, and maybe I'd imagine that the majority of people listening to this podcast are probably within the white collar professions, that it's such an incredible option for kids. I think the blue collars, the trades, the home services, things like that. I mean, it was, if I'm being totally honest, somewhat looked down upon maybe a little bit, at least, in terms of career options.
Yeah.
But as I've grown, I've recognized it as such a great opportunity, both in terms of, like, as you said, the service, the way you could help people, and the financial opportunities that are there. So I really appreciate that part of your story, that you're changing that perspective within the world, trying to elevate that a little bit.
Well, I had a front seat, Aaron, and so I just wanted to jump in for just a moment to say I wasn't in love with it either at first, but I'll tell you what endeared me. And when I say I had a front seat, I would witness, I would witness again, you know, a technician who's run, I don't know, 4 or 5 calls in a day. They've been in crawl spaces. They've been in attics. They're just beat down. They would hop in the back of their truck, put on a fresh new shirt to look good, knowing they're going into somebody else's home. So they want to, do their best to look good for that last call of the day. And you might have an elderly lady and you're there for one reason. And then you notice some light bulbs are out, or, there's taking the trash out, or moving some heavy boxes for it. And the time and time again, I saw this type of behavior, not from everybody, but honestly, the majority of the technicians realizing they're in people's home and the care that they gave to people in their homes is what really, I go, I want to be around these people. Business in the early ages, not so much. And that's why I ultimately transitioned to Nextar. I know we'll get there. Some of my early experiences were a little bit more cutthroat and not the way that I would want to be represented as a business owner or a business representative, but the people, the way I saw them give, the way I saw them care, the way I saw them, if somebody couldn't afford something, just try to go through any loophole to help figure it out for people. The caring and the love for the community that I saw in those technicians out there in the field, and then the office staff that supported them too. I mean, just a community. So I fell in love, as you can tell.
Beautiful. Love that.
And one person that you seem to refer back to a lot, as well, and I'm curious if this was the moment it was first introduced to you or not, is you seem to be very inspired by Wallace Wattles. which is not a name that you hear that much of. I guess he's kind of like there's adherents to people that swear by Dale Carnegie, or they swear by I can't think of his name now. Think Think and Grow Rich. Well, I'm going back like to the OGs, and actually, when you think about it, Wallace Waddles was probably the OG of these OGs, because more into the 1800, right, 19th century, late 1800s, 1870s, 1880s was when he wrote these books. They seem to have quite an influence on you.
They do, and I'm happy to share why. So my heritage, my ancestry is native to the region like just south of Colorado. So I was part of a nation that's was known as the Cheyenne. In the English language is known as the Cheyenne Nation. And so there was always these principles of just let's keep it basic, let's keep it high level, and let's live naturally. Well, the reason I was so attracted to Waddles, two main reasons. Number one, language is clear, clean, simple, and direct, and it was very empowering. There wasn't some boogeyman that I had to run from or be scared of, or some mysteries to solve. It was a lot of empowerment, and and he didn't do a lot of buildup with it either. We're not talking about, and I don't mean any disparagement, but it wasn't Eckhart Tolle. I didn't need 100 pages of building me up to believe in myself. It was implanted in a language which was simple and succinct. And the second reason I fell in love with him again later in life, first it served. So what I'm referencing is a triad of books: Think and Grow. Just like the famous Napoleon Hill book, but his was The Science of, and it was the science of being well, the science of being great, and the science of being rich. And the reason that I learned later, the simplicity of the language and the directness of the empowerment is why I was initially attracted. But as I developed my own values later, I realized that I fell in love with him because he went in this order. First, you must be well. Then you can be great. And as a result of being great, you shall be rich. And so many other things I had read, The Millionaire Next Door and How to Get Rich and Get Rich Quick. And so it felt like, and most of his books, if you look at it today, when you go get that book and you open it, you will find it titled The Science of Being Rich. And then the other two books are kind of like small print underneath. But what I believe is, and so I buy the book for people all the time. I tell them, start in reverse order. Start with the science of being well. And to this day, my own personal hierarchy of beliefs, I have an acronym, HFC. HFC. All that stands for is health, family, community. Health, family, community. And my health encompasses things not only financial, physically, spiritually, network, mental, all of those things. But in my own experiences, I believe that if you don't take care of yourself first, if you don't take care of your palace, your riches, everything that you were gifted, which to me is your physical embodiment and your mental faculties, well, then you're not good to anybody else. And I believe that our responsibility is the next closest circle. That's the family. So I do believe that before I run out and do anything communal, I do want to take care of my family. And all of these things are influenced through my experiences. So when I speak with conviction, it's not intended to be defaming of anything else, but it is a conviction, because I did see people in my community who would run out and do all these community efforts, but their kids were just bad as hell, or they didn't take care of their family, or they didn't honor their spouse, or, and it's like, what are you doing? Is this a show? Or their health would deteriorate, but they just kind of gave sacrificially to others. And it's like, giving themselves on the altar of this thing without even caring for themselves first, the very gift that they were given, to give even more to others. So thanks for letting me get a little preachy there, but that's just a quick recap
No,
of the ways that Wallace has inspired me.
there's one quote that when I read it, because when you as Aaron knows, I'm big into books, and when we came across your content, and when we're reading stuff, and it said, and you start talking about Wallace Waddles, and I'm shocked. I've never heard of this guy. I've never heard of him. I never heard of him. And I went and studied and got the book, and it was great because I have a master's degree in philosophy, and I love it that he's like, the only other books you should read besides this one is like Schopenhauer and like Hegel's dialectic. I'm like, wow, that's intense. Like maybe people in like the 1880s had more time. Like I took a 1-year course on Hegel, and I can't imagine anybody just reading that for pleasure. But the Schopenhauer stuff, and I would imagine that he lived during the time of Friedrich Nietzsche, so he'd probably also to talk about some of that stuff. people forget that Nietzsche's more of a self-help author than a philosopher. But one of the things when I was reading it, I read this quote, and it kind of reminded me of you. Um, and I actually debated about whether to read it or not, because I think to anybody else this line would be offensive. I think if anybody else, I would read this line and they would be like, yeah, but have to back it up. And maybe you will,
I
and
think you're
you'll
right.
probably have a good
It'll make the
intention.
show much more fun.
But he said, so here's the line. He says, if you want to help the poor, demonstrate to them that they can become rich. Prove it by getting rich yourself.
Subscribe. I subscribe, and I recommend this lifestyle to all. There's some guilt there, and misappropriately applied, but I hope you can see associatively. Survivor's guilt, survival's guilt. I get it. I get it when I go home sometimes. You change, and look at you, man. There's something, and there's other people that are happy. But yeah, I sincerely believe that being the example, because there were certain examples that I saw, and by seeing that and understanding that, that's why I became an avid reader. Number one, because that was fortunately something I was naturally inclined to. Number two, as you might have imagined in the earlier comments, my mother ensured that I was highly literate. But in the same, it was like, I got to see it. Seeing sometimes just the books weren't enough, and I've never vilified the rich per se. I vilify behaviors and actions in my own mind. I know that. I know I do that. But I always said, if you got, it was just so basic to me. If you have more to give, you can help more people. And again, if I'm following my health, family, community model, I said, well, I got to start with me. Let me prove the formula. I'm not going to be out here preaching to people. I love, you know, and I'm just going to choose my words carefully here, but I love people that profess things that they haven't actually modeled or demonstrated or done themselves. It's like, okay, that's fun. But the person that I know that has done the grind, they may not be as eloquent. They may not have the same level of showmanship, which is a word that cracks me up. Can we sit down and actually have a conversation with you as a human being? I look you in the eyes and you can tell I'm listening. Well, then that's the kind of rich I want to be. And as a result, I hung around people like that who help show me the patterns of behavior, discipline, and actions that could help me accumulate a degree of comfort. So I love it, man. Let's get rich. You know what poverty is? I heard once. You just reminded me of this quote too. He told me this difference. He said the difference between poverty and being poor, because he was saying nobody in the U.S. has actually ever been poverty stricken. So I was ready to argue, especially given my background. Let me tell you about it. He said poverty is the absence of choice. And I just had to sit with that for a while. I had to sit with that for a while because I wanted to argue. But I've thought of that and I reflect on it from time to time. And sometimes it's a nice conversation starter. But I can tell you this, with that definition, I was poor. I've been poor as hell, but I've never had poverty because fortunately, due to my mental faculties and this nation, for all its flaws, especially speaking as a native, I can still tell you I've had choice and I've had opportunity. And then what do you do with that? You can choose to be a victim. You can choose to get after it. And I honor your choice. I'll meet you wherever your choices meet me. And I'll honor you for how you choose to show up. I'll say that. But thank you. I like it.
Yeah, no problem. So around this time that you've transformed, you're horrible ditch digger, and you need to be in the office. And most people go the other way, right? Most people are like, you're not good in the office. Now go dig a ditch, right? And so you kind of do like this like reverse Uno, right? And you now you find yourself in this office, and you have to with a tie, and you have this insatiable appetite. So you're reading, you get a hold of Wallace Waddles and stuff like that. What happens? What happens like next? Like what? Okay, so you're in the right environment. So can you continue the story?
All right, thank you. And look, for the record, because we're recording this, I was a great ditch digger. I wasn't a great technician.
Okay,
like, yeah, no, I could go like a mule. I just chunk. It was the technical pieces when I had to understand which way to properly insert the valve and then how to solder it properly. It's like that's when I fell apart. But you just give me a dumb task to repeat over and over. Just ask my wife. I can go all day. Just honey, move all that wood from there to there, and it's done. Like I'm great. But if you tell me to line it up right and cut it at a perfect angle and then make sure they fit later, that's a problem. So.
There's so much more to ditch digging than I ever knew.
Just brute strength, brother. Just you got to have a strong back and gritty hands, and you can do it. But yeah, so what was happening at that point where the transformation really starts to take place? is I start to see myself in a light I had never seen. I think like one of the first things was I became the call center manager. Then I became the call center and dispatcher. Then I became the office manager. Then I became a service manager. But the real moment, we can unpack all that, but I don't think it's necessary. I'll make the point right here. One of the transformational moments is I got a business card. Oh my gosh. And it had my name on it.
Mm.
And, at this point I had, I'd reconciled with my father. He's back in my life. I love him, but I would never forget. I went and just gave it to my mom. I went and gave it to my mom, business card. And, this day and age that doesn't hit like it used to, but for those of us that know back in the day, a nice thick copy. And, I had to pay for 50 of those. Kids, you better be here. Why would I even need a business card? Who am I talking to where I need a business? Yeah, I got a business card with my name on it, manager title. And that's when I started to go, oh, whoa, wait a minute. And I reflected back. And, now I can see it more clearly. And I think about some of the ways that I used to organize my friends or organize things in the community, or just some desires that I had for leadership when I had a belief or a cause or a mission. Now I was bringing that to business, and I start to, oh, wait a minute. I can lead. Maybe I can lead. Maybe I'm not dumb. Maybe I'm not slow. Maybe my skill set is just somewhere else. And one thing that I understood very clearly, to other people's chagrin to this day, business is numbers, and we can continue to have a business relationship based on those numbers. If they don't, we can still have a personal relationship. But if you're missing out on, the business strategy or deliverables, well, we have to have that conversation. And that, to me, that's always been a different conversation. I don't feel bad about, I don't care how much of a good friend we are or how much we aren't, how alike we are, or how different we are. I tell you, like I mentioned, Ed Coleman, like a big, tall, blonde white man. We had nothing in common. I'm a short brown guy from the neighborhood, nothing in common. But when it came to business, we kicked butt. We got things done. And through that, we formed a relationship. So I just think that was the turning point where I realized, okay, maybe business isn't all old white guys who are evil. Maybe as I start to think about the people we serve, and I start to look at the careers we're creating, and I start to see somebody giving me an opportunity. Now, wait a minute. I think this is a game I get. I think I can actually play and exceed here. So that's when I first got the first idea that maybe I can do this. Maybe I can be a business person.
What's interesting about this story and hearing your story, it's rare that you have somebody telling them their story and then interlude with these philosophical insights about things. But I have a question. I'm curious to hear what your reaction to this is. One of the interesting things about hearing your story and reading of your story is the little details. You talk about like getting the business card. That reminds me actually of the story about, there's a story Abraham Lincoln would tell. He was like, the first time that he ever felt like he was worth something is he did a job on a ferry or something like that. And he brought a person across one of the rivers, and and then when the person got to the other end, the guy flipped him like a quarter or something, or silver dollar, if it's something like that. I think it was silver dollar. And he said it was the first time he'd ever been paid for anything in his life. And because most of the money that he made, he had to give to his father at the time. That's the way things worked back then. It was the first time he'd ever, like, the amount of self-worth that gave him. Stuck with, I think he even said he still has that silver dollar, whatever it was. And you with these business cards, like getting a business card. I haven't handled a business card probably in 10 years. I can't think of when anybody's handed me a business card. Do you think that kids today or young people today are missing out on moments like that because of the way that everything's sort of gone digital and working from home and stuff like that?
I'll misapply some terms here, but I hope that the intent sticks together. I think now it's a blue check mark. I think that's what it's called, where you verify something like that, right? And I think there are still these social. There are still, we're always as humans, I believe, we're always going to find a way to be social hierarchy and social validation. So I don't know that they're missing out in that way. I just think it's a little different. And I think things are happening a little bit quicker. And that's just the natural order of things from my belief perspective. So I think they get it. But yeah, okay. But here's your point, or here's my point, actually, to the question you asked. There's going to be some people who get that blue check mark and they're just quiet in their room from, they go, I got it. Yeah, I did it. Right. And there's other people who go, I deserve a blue check mark. How come I don't have my blue check mark yet? And so I don't care if it's a business card, if it's a title. I just think we have this human condition of, those who are maybe entitled. And, I should have had it yesterday. And I think that's happened, as far as I know, happened as long as time has existed. But I still think there's some marketers out there. I just think they've moved to digital online platforms. My instant reaction to that question.
I think there's a lot to be said for that. I think even today, like you said, there's different symbolism of having achieved. I think, again, thinking about my kids, getting a real paycheck is exciting for them, even when it's, on a lower level because they worked at a summer camp and they made $300 in a month. There's still that check that, like, I worked and I got something. And there's a certain level of, wow, I only got X for all the time that I worked.
Welcome to the club.
And that's part of serving their time as a young people. But I think that either sense of entitlement or sense of maybe gratification or fulfillment, I think comes from the way that kids are parented, or whether that's from their biological parents or the their family structure, or from the mentors around them and the teachers who have just raised them to be grateful and to not feel entitled. And I think that's the challenge in the world that we live in today. You mentioned before that none of us are in poverty, let's say, but and even in this country, in America, even the poorest are much better off than generations before and in most other countries in the world. But making sure that our kids don't grow up entitled and feeling like they deserve something is really, I think, the challenge in raising them right now.
You know what you just made me think of too? Thank you for sharing that, Aaron. Thank you. And you know what that just made me think of too, as I was listening? And I'm guilty of this, so I'm just going to admit it right here in public, because that'll help me take action on it. I don't know that we have enough tangible acknowledgments in business today. I just started reflecting on that too. It's easy for me to talk about society, but let's look in the mirror real quick. What am I doing leading Nextar today? What's the business card that I'm giving the people that I just sent 2 emails today. The 2 people, unsolicited. I heard something cool in a passing conversation about them, so I wanted to send them. I sent them an email. Oh, the CEO heard about my good work. Yeah, I want him to feel that, right? But what is the tangible? What is the thing? What is the business card of today for people to understand that? And I wonder, so I'm just kind of putting that out there in the ethers for me to think about and maybe share with my team here. And, what are some of these tangible reminders, acknowledgments, and celebrations? Because I had somebody recently, you may or may not be familiar with the term. It's called a challenge coin. And I learned this from the military. And what I learned is that they're these really well done, heavy brass coins. And the first one I learned about, I was working out with some Army Rangers, which is a sentence in and of itself. They basically saved my life from a health ailment. But they had these coins, and I noticed. So one day I finally was curious. I said, what's up with the coins, man? Well, they had all served in a regiment where they each got one of these very special customized coins. And what I learned is that when you've been through something, and I know that there's, Medal of Honor, and I know that there's other things, but this one was very specific to their team. I think there's maybe 12 of them. And then the other side of that, is the human side of it. He said, yeah. And the other thing is, if, I don't care where you're at, if I can, if I see one of my, fellows passing in the airport and I call for his coin and he doesn't have it on him, he has to do anything I say. So, first it was this acknowledgement, but then it was this fraternal thing. And I just think there's so much to it. But the point I'm getting at is, I have a version of a challenge coin, and I was sharing that conversation with somebody, and they go, oh, nice. But when I put it in their hand, when they held it, when they felt the weight, and then they start rubbing, like, as soon as that transfer and they felt it, there was something that happened. And I think that ties back to the trades, where you started, and you said, right now, currently, a robot and AI cannot go out and make the repair. We own the last mile of interacting with the homeowner and making the repair. And there's just still something very tactile and tangible that feeds the beings that we are. And I always tell my children this, and I remind our people who say, remote workers are just as effective as anybody else. I say, yeah, maybe from a productivity standpoint, but relationally, I tell them the same things I tell my kids when they go, yeah, I have a girl and I'm going to see her. I go, you're going to see her? Where are you going to see her? Oh, we got FaceTime. I see her on my phone. I said, okay, well, get back to me and tell me how that first kiss goes. There's just something about the tactile, the physical relationship. And I know I went on a tangent there, but is it the business card? Is it the challenge coin? Is it the handshake? Is it put my hand on your shoulder when you're crying? It's like, there's just something there to being present. There's something about these tokens that mean a lot more to us than just a blue check mark on a screen that fades and keeps us up at night. Getting a little self-righteous on that one, but I'm just thinking about it out loud. Thank you for letting me indulge.
Well, it shows your leadership and how you're thinking about, empowering the people around you it's probably a good segue. I know we have limited time a little bit, so I want to make sure we hear the rest of your story because,
Sure.
we've heard the good part, but we're coming to the good part, right? You've grown businesses, you've inspired other people to grow businesses. I know our audience is going to want to hear the rest of that.
Yeah. We're getting to the part where I think a lot of people want to hear. It's like, okay, you're working for this person. Obviously, you didn't go from this straight to CEO of Nextar. So what happens? What happens next?
Yeah, and I can fly right through this, and we'll get to some other areas. Wherever you want to pause, you let me know. But I'm going to fast forward. I'm taking a little time warp.
Mm-hmm.
Buckle up. So
Okay.
what happens is I had mentioned the business had been purchased, consolidated. My good friend Ed left. Everybody that I knew from the mom and pop, they left. Well, it's my job, and it's a steady paycheck, and just all the reasons, change is hard to do. So I stayed. I stayed for about 6 years with this big corporation. But I'll tell you what. The things that I saw in that corporation had me questioning if I could be a business person also. It was a very, top line, bottom line, zero sum mentality. And now I know all these words. Back then I didn't know what it was. I just know I didn't like it. It didn't feel good. As being, a service manager, there were times where we would get concerns from a homeowner, damage concern. We had a technician out there, put a hole in the drywall, moving the drain equipment through anything, right? And we were wrong, and I wanted to pay it. I'll never forget. I go to the GM at the time, and the GM, I just show him, and I go, hey, can you sign this? He goes, well, what's this? I said, well, you need to get this check approved for repair at this homeowner's home. And he looks at it. He goes, oh, let me show you where these go. And he pulls out this drawer. It's a good sized drawer like this one behind me. It's a good size, like an accounting file drawer. And he opens it, and I see stacks of them in there. And he kind of flips it in there, he closes it. And he says, no, unless they have an attorney, in hand or a letter from an attorney, that's where those go. And we don't pay those. Oh my gosh, we did that though. Okay, so this is the type of behavior that I'm seeing. The other thing about this is just like, it doesn't feel good to me. So eventually I leave and I get into food distribution. I go to work for a family-owned business that was in food distribution. So I'm going to go do that for a while. At least I can see the owner every day. And, even though in passing, it was a large organization, but so maybe that's what it is. I bump into Ed Coleman again. He tells me to come. Hey, we opened our own business. Come work with us. And I said, no, home services. I get it. I don't like it. Left a bad taste in my mouth because, I hadn't seen him in a while. I go, I don't want to do that. No. Come on over. Me and a couple of the guys, we got a business. Come join us. So I did. I went and interviewed, and I saw some of the old faces, and the feelings came back. I was like, these are good guys. Let me try it out. Again, became their call center manager, service manager. But through that, they were part of this group called Nextar. And so what I realized is it wasn't just the goodness of these individuals, but they also had these processes in place that were employee-centric, customer-centric, and business-centric. And I came to learn later it's called the triple win, that the company should win, the customer should win, and the employee should win. And they believed in that balance. So I went to a Nextar training. I thought these people were crazy, but I left feeling really empowered. Ultimately, which empowered me, as I wanted to change my life forever, I left my home state, and I felt empowered to start my own business as long as I could be part of Nextar. So I did. I left my home state. I went to another state. I actually partnered with a gentleman to start a business from scratch, and we became part of Nextar. And then Nextar helped us grow this business from nothing. We started from nothing. And I was a golden child, which was not a good thing, which later I learned some lessons in, meaning that we grew quickly and everything was going my way. And over the course of that, I became endeared to Nextar and enamored with Nextar, that when I did exit that business, all I wanted to be was a Nextar coach. And so at least that'll get us up to the point of me joining Nextar. And that was an accelerated version, but that gets us up to that point at least. Thoughts, questions, comments?
No,
I
that's
want to hear
great.
about what is Nextar?
Come on, everybody. No, I'm just kidding. Thank you for that. So Nextar is a member-owned organization that helps home service businesses in plumbing, heating, cooling, and electrical. So it only focuses on residential service, only focuses on plumbing, heating, cooling, and electrical. But guess what? They're not trying to buy you. So they're not saying things to try to fatten you up so they can buy you. Guess what? They're here to motivate. They're here to connect you. And the other thing about Nextar is there was a peer network of other people that I met, which that was the other reason why I felt confident to go out and start a business, is I know I could pick up the phone at any time. And the trust that was built within Nextar, and I believe this trust within Nextar is because we are member owned. I report to a board of directors that's made up of members. They have fiduciary responsibility and they help with strategy. But our members know that Nextar moves in the best interests of the entire membership. Will we make a decision that might take off a member or two or a region? Potentially, but we're moving with the greater good of the entire. So it's a collective, it's a member-owned organization that's here to help you accelerate your home service business.
Okay, that's important background, I think.
No, that's it. No, that's good. I also wanted to point out, I was just looking for it. This is what I carry around. It's it's not a military coin. I got this from the Daily Stoic. It says Amor Fati on the front. love of fate. And on the back, as quote from Nietzsche, is not merely to bear what is necessary, but to love it. And it's I carry it around with me as well. So I'm all into the coin thing. I get it. Um, so regarding what you just said, and again, I was looking at like the Wallace Wattles and the trilogy, right? The science of getting rich, the science of being well, the science of being great. It seems like this is kind of your journey a little bit, right? You know, this starting with well, and now in the order that you say is important: well, great, rich, right? And so now we're in the science of being great. One thing I notice is that you end all of your LinkedIn posts, and you even your emails and your uh, everywhere, you always end by saying be great. Why?
Possible, as much as possible. I had heard this concept, and it is about it's a shout out to Waddles, sure enough. But I also heard about this thing called be do have. I don't know if you're familiar with this, but it's like um, most of the world looks at it in reverse order of have, do, be. As soon as I have enough time, I'll take my kids to the park, and then I'll be a great dad. So it's like I need to have something to do the thing to be. And so the thing that I like to inject in my household is just be. First, you have to be it. You have to be well. You have to be great, and then you'll be rich. So similarly, that's what I implant. So when the children go off to school, I don't say have a great day. I'll ask them, I'll say, what are you going to do today to be great? Well, I'm going to do great things. Or at the end of the day, how were you great? How were you a great friend? How were you a great scholar? And they'll say, well, I did this. And so what will you have as a result? Well, I'm going to have great test scores, or I'm going to have great friendships. So I learned that here at Nextar, that be, do, have, and flip it. And I added on the great, like just be great, and watch what happens.
Hmm.
And obviously it's working because I see your LinkedIn title is you're the general of awesome. So
Hey,
obviously you're creating a good environment around you.
self-given though, don't tell anybody.
That's most important part.
So basically, from inside, once you're in Nextar, you become like a favorite coach. I mean, you really, I think, take a lot of your life experience and you share it with other people, and then you become the CEO. Is like that's how the story ends?
That's it. Only took 12 years, 7 years to get to that point. And yes, thank you. Part of it was in coaching, I did have great experiences, but the other thing was we were still relatively small at the time. And the person who had been my business coach when I was a member was actually the CEO of Nextar. And so when I had the opportunity to come in, he knew me as an operator. And even though all I wanted to be as a coach, cushy job, consult people, tell them what to do. Nobody calls you after hours. You don't have to work weekends. Like, love the consulting job. And I still, hey, I'll just tell you right now, love the trades. But I'll tell you what, having 100 employees out there driving our trucks on the roads in people's homes makes me anxious. So I'm really grateful to be part of a consultancy because there's a little less exposure there. But yeah, I was coaching, and then the business was growing, back 12 years, 13 years ago, whatever. We were like 30 employees, but our CEO was really growing the organization. And we had this phenomenal trainer that was bringing in revenue to the point where he needed some operational support. And so I went over to become the manager of the training team. So I went from coaching to training, which are tied very closely, had that opportunity. From that, we really grew that department to the point where the organization was growing. And then the CEO, his name is Jack Tester, said, well, Julian, I need a VP. Would you like to be my VP? We're at that size now. For sure. I love this guy. He's a great guy. I want to work alongside him. 3 years pass, and he says, Julian, if you ever wanted to be the CEO of Nextar, you'd probably want to throw your hat in the ring here because I'm getting ready to step aside. And I thought for myself, I never wanted to be this president or CEO of Nextar, but okay, am I going to leave? Like, am I going to take this VP title, and where am I going to go? At that point, I spent 7 years here. I was in love. Everything was happy. And, the opportunity to lead a member-owned organization, and trust me, there are days where I question my decision, but it doesn't last long because, and what I mean by that, look, when you're running your own business, you make your own decision, you answer to your people, and you keep it moving. I answer to 1,000 different businesses, 9 board members once a quarter, and 1 chair of the board every week. I have weekly one-to-ones. So, there are some lessons to be learned in having responsibility to others. And there are also challenges that come with that. So that was the version of, how that transpired over time to get to this.
One of the things I have to be very, very candid and honest. One of the things when we were preparing for this, for having you on, there was a lot of emphasis on, okay, well, he's CEO of Nextar. He helped, let's talk about the trades. Let's talk about plumbing. Let's talk about, stuff like that. And what I find absolutely fascinating is that we just basically had a whole hour of conversation with you, and we didn't really dive into that at all. Not saying that it's not important to you. It's very, 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 very important to you. But I really just found that interesting, because I'm like, no, that's not what makes Julian so interesting. What makes him interesting, I think, is him and what he brings to this industry, which is something that I don't think you normally see, um, brought to this, brought to an industry like the home services. Um, that's not really a
I mean,
question.
I
You can
wonder,
respond to that.
maybe
Thank
other people
you.
from the outside don't see it, but it's probably happening on the inside. I mean, these people are running incredible businesses. And I think on the outside, we just see a truck pull up at our house and someone comes and fixes our toilet.
It's
Yeah.
twofold. I want to add on to that. So twofold. Number one, thank you. And I think from a personal perspective, I have seen so many confused people in my life, and I just think they're all beautiful and they just need to find where they belong. But I think if they start with themselves first and then find a cause that, and even if their cause was, mergers and acquisitions, that's great. Are they excited about it? Are they passionate about it? Can they fulfill their lives through it? Do whatever you want to do. So that's one side of it. But the other side is, you just nailed it, Aaron. And I'm glad you said it, because my brain was kind of wrestling with it and you nailed it. The type of business leaders that I get to hang around are very similar, where many of them were technicians, but rarely do they, some of them, still want to break out the old soldering and get to it, or, replace a thermocouple to say they still got it. But so many of them are interested into pouring into others. And that's what this is. I guess what I default to is, I want an accountant who stumbles into this. I want a retail salesperson who stumbles into this. I want an account rep to stumble into this and go, oh my gosh, I got, the number of people go, oh, I have a similar story, and, I can win, and maybe I could be the president of my company. And, that's what it's about to me, because the trades has been great, and the trades is an amazing industry, and everything that we have is very resilient. Again, I think that's another thing where I just luckily landed on my feet here, to have this type of industry that is so resilient and resistant and growing constantly. But the reality is, I get to hang around a ton, and that's why I love our independent business owners, because Aaron nailed it. These are the type of people that I get to hang around, who have very similar stories and desires to empower others, and I'm so grateful to be aligned with them.
Yeah. We all have a mutual friend who's honestly, he runs an HVAC company, plumbing and HVAC, and he's one of the most thoughtful and successful entrepreneurs I know. And, very successful what he does. And he's a CEO first, not just a plumber.
And he gives a lot of credit to Nextar. We should say. So Julian, we have time. We have a little bit of time left. We like to do these two things in the last segment: a hot seat and lightning round. Now, we don't have time to do all the hot seat questions, so I'm just going to pick one. Essentially, we call this section the hot seat, where we're going to hit you with a real world high stakes business dilemma that we got from somebody. And we want to hear your advice to it. So here's your first hot take. You ready? Okay. Your nephew is working for you, and honestly, he sucks at his job. Your family expects you to keep him on, but he's hurting the business. Do you fire him and risk family drama, or keep him and hope he improves?
Remember what I asked someone one time earlier in my business? I said, I have this person that I think is really great. They're a family, I think, and all the reasons. And I'll never forget, they just looked at me, the owner of the business looked at me and said, sounds great for you. I'm not sure that's good for us. I wouldn't have hired him in the first place, and his butt is gone when he's not performing. Too easy.
Oh, wow. Okay. We have room for one more then. A wealthy client offers to pay you double for a same job, but it means canceling an existing loyal customer appointment. Do you take the money or honor your existing commitment?
Depends on the priority. It depends on the priority. And one thing that we do teach, and I hope people can take away and consider, always have priority buckets that people can pay more for. If we're okay paying what we pay for a bag of small chips at a convenience store, I'm not going to vilify any other business that has segments that say, look, I can get to you faster. It's going to cost more. So I don't care if they're wealthy or not. That is an option that money can buy you. So yeah, it wouldn't be based on the money. It would be based on the priority, but I'm already going to have one of those gaps open anyway. So run your business that way. Don't be ashamed to leave little gaps for people who can pay a little bit more to get that priority service. And you better take care of the person who needs your help first, and then you'll sleep fine at night.
All right. Julian, we've got time for one more final segment we like to call fact or fiction. in this sense, where we take some of the most overused cliche business and leadership advice and put it to Julian Scadden's leadership test. The stuff that this is the stuff that gets repeated in every business book, keynote speech, and thought leader post on LinkedIn. So we're going to hit you with these classic business mantras, and you tell us if they're fact or fiction, and then break down why if you want to.
Okay.
Let's see how many of these are truths. Ready?
Cool.
Okay. The customer's always right.
Fiction.
Fake it till you make it.
Never.
Why?
Because then you're fake. And I understand the thought behind it, but here's two things I don't like. Fake it till you make it, an imposter syndrome. I've never felt like an imposter. I felt like I still have more to learn. And by even labeling yourself with imposter syndrome, I think that was co-created for us. And now it creates this whole confusion psychologically and non-consciously that you don't need. You just have more that you need to learn. Faking it till you make it. Stop being a fake. Again, just say, I just don't know yet. Tell me. I call it the be dumb quick movement. If you don't know what it is, just raise your hand and say, I don't understand. If you're in the right room, they'll teach you and they'll help you and they'll bring you along. And trust me, I've been kicked out of places who look down at people who don't know everything. And I'm glad I'm not there anymore.
Good answer. Okay. Leaders are born, not made.
Finally, a little bit of a stumper. There are some attributes that I believe are innate.
It's lonely at the top.
That's a good answer from you.
I can't stand that one, and I'm going to tell you the in place of it's lonely. If it's lonely at the top, it's because you're a jerk. But I will say this: no one in your seat thinks about the business more than you. That's the way I like it said. Nobody's going to think about this business more than you, and that's fair.
No risk, no reward.
I agree.
Culture eats strategy for breakfast.
Cliches, man. Cliches. It's true.
Okay.
It's true. It's true.
You have to spend.
But define your culture. Don't just throw that word around. Define culture. Culture is the way we treat each other along our journey is the way I define it.
You have to spend money to make money.
Yes, you do.
Fail fast, fail often.
Yes, please.
Work smarter, not harder.
Always.
Nice guys finish last.
That is a lie.
Last one. If you build it, they will come.
Nope. The number of good ideas. I love that one. Because the number of good ideas that people, especially now that because the trades are doing so well, that people that have these, they're good ideas, man. I'm going to tell you right now, whether it's software or an idea, I've seen so many in the few years since the pandemic that are good ideas. And we tell them, okay, sure. You want to be a partner? Let's get you in front of our members and see who bites. And they just don't, it's just like people go, yeah, I love that. And then they don't buy it. So sorry, great ideas fail.
Well, Julian, it has been such an honor having you on our show. I know I know the listeners are walking away with real wisdom here, like real deep wisdom that they can apply to their own journeys. And we're really grateful for it. And I know that the listeners are really grateful for it too. If people want to learn more about you and your work, where should they go?
Nextarnetwork.com. I can be found on LinkedIn, and I appreciate you all so much for sharing your platform with me. I sincerely appreciate the opportunity.
All right. Thank you, Julian. Be sure to follow Julian on LinkedIn and visit Nextar and learn all the things that they're doing there. Maybe model that type of business for your own industry. I think especially the marketing and advertising industry would do really well if they had something like that. And thank you so much to our audience for listening to Genius Scouts podcast, and we'll see you next time.
Stay tuned to Genius Scouts.
Thanks, Julian.
Thanks for tuning in to the Genius Scouts podcast. Be sure to subscribe for more episodes, and if you're ready to take your personal brand to the next level, visit geniusscouts.com.